What would make a husband go silent the moment he meets his own newborn? And why would his next move be calling a lawyer instead of celebrating? When the envelope landed on my hospital bedside table, I realized too late that my husband wasn't the clueless man I'd thought. How did my best-kept secrets turn into court exhibits? And was I really the victim, or just the architect of my own downfall? The moment Elias saw our newborn daughter's face, his entire world seemed to collapse. I watched from my hospital bed as my husband of 10 years went completely silent, his face draining of all color as he stared at the baby in my arms. "Isn't she beautiful?" I whispered, exhausted but glowing with that new mother radiance everyone talks about. "Look at those eyes, Elias. She's perfect." But Elias didn't respond. He just stood there, frozen, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the soft beeping of hospital monitors and the distant sounds of the maternity ward. "Elias?" I tried again, feeling the first flutter of anxiety in my chest. "Are you okay? You're scaring me." He finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. It wasn't joy or wonder, or even the overwhelmed emotion I'd expected from a new father. It was something else entirely, something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. "I need some air," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with our daughter and a growing sense of dread. The nurses bustled around me, checking vitals and making cheerful small talk, but I barely heard them. All I could think about was the look on Elias's face and the way he'd left without even holding his daughter. When my mother Vivian arrived an hour later with flowers and balloons, I was still staring at the door. "Where's Elias?" she asked, setting down her gifts and rushing to my side. "Oh my goodness, she's gorgeous. Look at that little face." "He went to get some air," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know how he gets with hospitals. He's probably just overwhelmed." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Elias had been acting strange for weeks, maybe even months. Distant, watchful, like he was waiting for something. I'd chalked it up to pre-baby nerves, but now I wondered if there was something more. When Elias's mother, Gina, arrived later that evening, she brought Leah, our 9-year-old daughter, who was bouncing with excitement to meet her baby sister. But when she asked where Daddy was, I had to make excuses again. "He's just taking care of some paperwork," I lied, forcing a smile. "You know how hospitals are with all their forms." Gina gave me a concerned look, but didn't say anything in front of Leah. Later, when Leah was distracted by the baby, Gina pulled me aside. "Zarina, where is my son really?" she asked quietly. "This isn't like him. He's been looking forward to this baby for months." "I honestly don't know," I admitted, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "He took one look at her and just left. I don't understand what's wrong with him." Gina's expression softened with sympathy, but I caught something else there too, something that looked almost like pity. "Maybe he's just processing everything. This is a big change." But I could tell she didn't believe it any more than I did. It was nearly midnight when the hospital orderly knocked on my door. I was alone again, the baby sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside my bed, when he entered with an envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Lysell, this was left at the nurse's station for you." My hands shook as I took the thick manila envelope. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize, and there was a return address from a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside, I found documents that made my world tilt sideways. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Divorce papers, custody agreements, and a note in Elias's careful handwriting that made everything crystal clear. I know about Shane. I know about everything. The baby's paternity test results are attached. We need to talk, but not tonight. My lawyer will be in touch. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold them. The paternity test results showed what Elias had somehow already figured out. The baby wasn't his, she was Shane's. Shane Ormond, my personal trainer, my lover, my biggest mistake. How had he known? How long had he known? And more importantly, what was he planning to do about it? The next morning brought a parade of visitors, flowers, and congratulations that felt like a cruel joke. I smiled and accepted gifts while my world crumbled around me, the divorce papers hidden in my bedside drawer like a ticking bomb. Elias finally returned around noon, but he was a different person. Gone was the warm, if reserved man I'd married. In his place stood someone cold and calculating, someone who looked at me like I was a stranger. "We need to keep up appearances," he said quietly when we were alone. "For Leah's sake, if nothing else. But when you're discharged, we're going to have a very long conversation." "Elias, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," he cut me off. "The baby's blood type made it clear the moment she was born." "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? I'm a science teacher, Zarina. I understand genetics." The way he said my name, like it tasted bitter in his mouth, made me flinch. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. You've been having an affair with your personal trainer for 8 months. The baby is his. You've been lying to me, to Leah, to everyone." His voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been screaming. When we got home 3 days later, the house felt like a war zone. Elias moved through the rooms like a ghost, methodically going about his business, while I tried desperately to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But I could feel him watching me, documenting everything I did. "Why are you taking pictures of everything?" I demanded one afternoon, catching him photographing something on his phone. "Insurance purposes," he said simply, but I knew it was more than that. He was building a case against me, collecting evidence for the divorce proceedings I was desperately hoping to avoid. My mother came by daily, bringing meals and offering support, but even she could sense the tension. "That husband of yours is being ridiculous," she declared one afternoon while helping with the baby. "So what if you needed some excitement in your life? Marriage isn't supposed to be a prison sentence. You're young and beautiful, and you deserve to be happy." "Mum, it's not that simple." "It absolutely is that simple. You've been married to that boring man for 10 years, working your tail off at that insurance company while he plays with test tubes and talks to teenagers all day. When was the last time he took you somewhere nice? When was the last time he made you feel special?" She had a point, even if I didn't want to admit it. Elias had become predictable over the years, safe, boring. When Shane had started paying attention to me at the gym, making me laugh and feel attractive again, it had been intoxicating. "You need to stand up for yourself," Mum continued. "Don't let him make you feel guilty for wanting more out of life." But guilt was exactly what I felt, especially when I looked at Leah. She'd been so excited about her baby sister, and now she kept asking why Daddy seemed sad all the time. "Is Daddy mad at me?" she asked one evening while I was putting her to bed. "Of course not, sweetheart. Daddy loves you very much. He's just adjusting to having a new baby in the house." "But he won't even hold her," Leah said, her voice small and confused. "And you guys don't talk to each other anymore. Are you getting divorced like Tommy's parents?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "We're not getting divorced," I lied. "Everything's going to be fine." But I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe me. Kids always know when something's wrong, even when the adults are trying to hide it. That night, I found Elias in his study, surrounded by papers and files. He looked up when I entered, his expression carefully neutral. "We need to talk about this," I said, gesturing vaguely at the space between us. "We can work this out, Elias. For Leah's sake, for the family." "There is no family anymore," he said quietly. "You made sure of that when you decided to have another man's baby." "It was a mistake. I was confused, lonely. You were married. You had a daughter who looked up to you. You had responsibilities." "I know that. but you don't understand what it's been like, feeling invisible in my own life. When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you surprised me with anything? Elias stared at me for a long moment. So, this is my fault. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. You're blaming me for your affair because I didn't make you feel special enough. I could hear the pain underneath his anger, and for a moment I almost reached for him. But then I remembered all the months of feeling neglected, all the times he'd chosen grading papers over spending time with me, all the ways he'd made me feel like I was just another obligation on his list. Maybe if you'd paid half as much attention to me as you do to your students, none of this would have happened, I said. The words hung in the air between us like poison. Elias's face went completely blank, and when he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Pack a bag for you and the baby. You're staying at your mother's until we can figure out the custody arrangements. You can't kick me out of my own house. Actually, I can. Check the deed. The house is in my name, bought with my inheritance from my grandfather. You have no legal claim to it. I stared at him, seeing a stranger. This wasn't the gentle, quiet man I'd married. This was someone harder, someone who'd been planning and preparing while I'd been stumbling around in denial. What about Leah? Leah stays here. This is her home, her school district. I won't disrupt her life any more than you already have. You can't take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. You'll have visitation rights. But she's not going to be dragged into whatever chaos you've created with your boyfriend. The way he said boyfriend made it sound dirty, shameful. And maybe it was. Maybe I was exactly what he thought I was. A selfish woman who'd destroyed her family for a few months of excitement. But as I packed my bags that night, listening to Leah cry in her room because she didn't understand why Mommy was leaving, I told myself that I was the victim here. Elias was the one being unreasonable, the one breaking up our family over a mistake. I deserved happiness, didn't I? I deserved to feel alive and wanted and special. The alternative, accepting that I was the villain in this story, was too painful to consider. Living at my mother's house felt like being a teenager again, except now I had a newborn who cried constantly, and a 9-year-old who visited on weekends with increasingly distant eyes. Mom tried to be supportive, but even her patience was wearing thin after 2 weeks of sleepless nights and my constant complaints about Elias. He's trying to turn Leah against me, I told her one morning over coffee, the baby finally sleeping in her carrier. Yesterday, when I picked her up, she barely hugged me goodbye. That man is vindictive, Mom agreed, refilling my cup. He's punishing you for being human, for having needs he couldn't meet. It felt good to have someone validate my feelings, to remind me that I wasn't entirely to blame for the mess my life had become. But there was a nagging voice in the back of my head that wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was exactly as selfish as Elias thought I was. I pushed that voice away and focused on the one bright spot in my life. Shane. He'd been texting me constantly since the baby was born, asking how I was doing, when he could see his daughter. The attention felt like a lifeline in the chaos of my crumbling marriage. Meet me at Bistro Cafe, I texted him one afternoon. I need to get out of here. Shane was waiting for me when I arrived, looking as gorgeous as ever in his fitted t-shirt and jeans. He stood up when he saw me, his face lighting up with that smile that had first caught my attention at the gym. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a little too long for a public place. "And this must be our little princess." Our little princess. The word sent a thrill through me that I tried to ignore. This was about the baby, I told myself, about making sure she knew her father. We found a corner table, and Shane ordered us both coffee while I tried to get comfortable with the baby. She'd been fussy all morning, and I was exhausted from another sleepless night. "You look tired," Shane observed, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "This must be so hard for you." "It is," I admitted, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Elias is being impossible. He won't even discuss counseling or trying to work things out. He just wants to punish me. He doesn't deserve you, Shane said firmly. I've been telling you that for months. You're too good for him, too alive. You need someone who appreciates what an amazing woman you are. It was exactly what I needed to hear, and I found myself leaning into his words like a plant reaching for sunlight. When he suggested we take a walk in the park nearby, I agreed without hesitation. We were sitting on a bench, the baby sleeping in her stroller, while Shane told me about his plans to open his own gym, when I saw a familiar figure approaching. My blood turned to ice as I recognized Elias walking toward us, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Zarina," he said when he reached us, his voice carefully polite. "I've been looking for you." "How did you know I was here?" I demanded, instinctively moving closer to Shane. "You posted it on Instagram," Elias said simply, pulling out his phone to show me my own story, a photo of my coffee cup with the cafe's logo clearly visible. "We need to talk." "We're having a conversation here," Shane interjected, standing up to face Elias. "Maybe you should call first next time." Elias looked at Shane like he was studying a particularly interesting specimen under a microscope. "And you must be Shane, the personal trainer." "That's right, and you must be the husband who drove his wife into another man's arms." I watched in horror as other cafe patrons began to notice the confrontation. Phones were coming out, and I could see people starting to record. This was exactly the kind of scene I'd been trying to avoid. "Elias, please," I said, standing up and trying to position myself between the two men. "Not here, not in public." "Where then?" Elias asked. "You won't return my lawyer's calls. You won't respond to texts about Leah's schedule. How exactly am I supposed to communicate with you?" "Maybe if you weren't being so unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" Elias's voice rose slightly, and I could see the cracks in his controlled facade. "My wife has been having an affair for 8 months, had another man's baby, and I'm being unreasonable for wanting a divorce?" The words echoed across the cafe, and I felt every eye in the place turn toward us. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. "You're making a scene," I hissed. "I'm making a scene." Elias laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Zarina, you brought your boyfriend to a public place to play house with his baby while you're still married to me, but I'm the one making a scene." "Hey now," Shane stepped forward, his chest puffed out. "There's no need to talk to her like that. She's been through enough." "She's been through enough?" Elias turned his attention back to Shane, and something in his expression made me nervous. "Tell me, Shane, what exactly do you think she's been through?" "She's been stuck in a loveless marriage with a man who doesn't appreciate her. She's been trying to find some happiness, some connection, and instead of supporting her, you're trying to destroy her." "I see." Elias nodded slowly. "And you think you're the answer to her problems?" "I think I'm someone who sees how incredible she is. Incredible enough to marry, because she's still married to me, in case you forgot." Shane's confident expression faltered slightly. "That's between you and her." "Actually, it's between me, her, and my lawyer. But since we're all here, let me ask you something. Are you planning to support this baby? Financially, I mean. Diapers, formula, doctor visits, college fund. That sort of thing." I watched Shane's face go pale, and my heart sank. We'd never talked about money, about the practical realities of raising a child. I'd been so caught up in the romance, the excitement of being wanted, that I'd never considered what would happen when the fantasy collided with reality. We haven't discussed that yet," Shane stammered. "I see. So you're incredible enough to sleep with another man's wife and get her pregnant, but not incredible enough to take responsibility for the consequences." "Elias, stop," I pleaded, but he wasn't finished. "Tell me, Zarina, what exactly did you think was going to happen here? That I'd just disappear quietly while you played happy family with your trainer? That Leah would be fine with you replacing her father with your boyfriend? That there wouldn't be any consequences for blowing up our entire life?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Because the truth was, I hadn't thought any of it through. I'd been living in a fantasy where I could have everything I wanted without anyone getting hurt, where I could pursue my happiness without considering the cost. "You're being cruel," I finally managed. "I'm being honest. Something you might want to try sometime." A phone buzzed nearby, and I realized someone had been live streaming the entire confrontation. My humiliation was now public, viral, permanent. By tomorrow, everyone would know that I was the cheating wife, the woman who'd destroyed her family for a personal trainer who couldn't even commit to supporting his own child. Elias must have realized it too, because his expression softened slightly. "Come home, Zarina. Let's handle this privately, like adults, for Leah's sake." But I was too angry, too embarrassed, too caught up in my own narrative of victimhood to see the olive branch he was offering. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I snapped. "You've humiliated me enough for one day." Elias stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, have it your way." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the cafe with Shane and a dozen strangers with cameras, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The video went viral overnight. By morning, I was tagged in dozens of posts across social media, with comments ranging from sympathetic to savage. The hashtag #ShakshaCheatingWife was trending locally, and my face was plastered across relationship blogs and Reddit threads, dissecting every word of the confrontation. "Don't read the comments," Mum advised, but I couldn't help myself. Each cruel observation felt like a physical blow, but I kept scrolling, torturing myself with strangers' opinions about my life. She really thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Feel bad for the husband. Guy handled it better than I would have. That personal trainer ran so fast when money came up, LeMayo. Poor kid is going to grow up seeing this video of her mum. That last comment hit the hardest. I looked at my sleeping daughter and realized that someday she'd be old enough to see this moment, to watch her mother's public humiliation and understand exactly how she came into the world. Shane had been notably quiet since the cafe incident. His texts went from frequent and flirty to sporadic and cautious. When I finally called him, he sounded distant. "This is getting complicated," he said. "Maybe we should take a break until things settle down." "A break?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Shane, we have a daughter together. You can't just take a break from being a father." "I'm not ready for all this drama, Zarina. I thought you were getting divorced, that this would be simpler." "It is simple. We just need to—" "Nothing about this is simple. Your husband ambushed me in public. There's videos everywhere, and now you're talking about child support and custody. This isn't what I signed up for." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in disbelief. The man I'd risked everything for, the one who'd made me feel so special and alive, was abandoning me the moment things got difficult. Work became another nightmare. I'd managed to keep my affair relatively quiet at the insurance office, but the viral video changed everything. My coworkers whispered when I walked by, and I caught them watching the video on their phones during lunch breaks. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office on Wednesday morning with a concerned expression. "Zarina, we need to talk about your recent absences." "I just had a baby," I said defensively. "I'm entitled to maternity leave." "Of course you are, but there are some discrepancies in your timesheets from before the baby was born. According to your records, you were working late several evenings when security cameras show you leaving at normal hours." My stomach dropped. I'd been meeting Shane during those times, claiming overtime to avoid suspicion at home. "There must be some mistake. There's also the matter of your personal situation becoming public. Several clients have called asking to be transferred to different adjusters. They're concerned about your judgment. My personal life has nothing to do with my job performance." Normally, I'd agree, but when your personal life involves fraud on your timesheets and affects client relationships, it becomes a company issue. I left her office with a formal warning and the knowledge that my job was hanging by a thread. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was crumbling because of a few months of poor decisions. The weekly family dinner at Gina's house that Sunday was torture. I'd been dreading it for days, but I couldn't skip it without making things worse with Leah. My daughter needed to see that I was still part of the family, still her mother. But the moment I walked in with the baby, the atmosphere was arctic. Gina was polite but cold, Tristan avoided eye contact, and Leah seemed more interested in helping her father in the kitchen than talking to me. "How are you holding up?" Gina asked, making conversation while we waited for dinner. "It's been difficult," I admitted, "but I'm managing." "I'm sure you are. You've always been resourceful." The way she said it made it clear she wasn't giving me a compliment. I looked around the familiar living room, at the family photos that still included me, and felt like a stranger in a place that had once been my second home. Dinner was even worse. Elias sat across from me, making pleasant conversation with everyone except me. He asked Leah about school, discussed weekend plans with Tristan, and helped Gina serve dessert like he was the perfect son and father. Which, I realized with a sick feeling, he probably was. "Daddy, can we go to the Science Museum this weekend?" Leah asked, and I watched my husband's face light up in a way it hadn't in months. "Of course, sweetheart. We can see the new dinosaur exhibit." "Can Mummy come too?" The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Everyone stopped eating, waiting to see how Elias would handle it. "That's up to your mother," he said carefully. "She's been very busy lately." I wanted to scream that I wasn't busy by choice, that I was busy trying to hold my life together while he systematically dismantled everything we'd built. But I couldn't say any of that in front of Leah. "I'd love to come," I said instead, forcing a smile. "Actually," Elias said quietly, "I think it might be better if we kept things simple for now. Just the two of us." The dismissal was gentle but firm, and it stung worse than if he'd shouted at me. He was cutting me out of our daughter's life one small moment at a time, and there was nothing I could do about it. After dinner, while Gina was putting away leftovers and Tristan was helping Leah with homework, Elias cornered me in the hallway. "We need to finalize the custody arrangements," he said quietly. "My lawyer has been trying to reach you." "I've been dealing with other things." "Like what? Your boyfriend who won't return your calls?" I stared at him, wondering how he knew about Shane's sudden disappearance. But of course he knew. Elias had always been observant, always paying attention to details others missed. "This doesn't have to be a war," I said. "We can work something out that's fair to everyone." "Fair?" Elias's eyebrows rose. "Zarina, you committed adultery, had another man's child and lied about it for months. What exactly do you think would be fair?" "I made a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices, and now Leah is the one paying for them." I looked through the doorway at my daughter, bent over her math homework with her uncle's help, and felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. She did look different lately, quieter, more withdrawn. The confident, happy child I'd raised was disappearing, replaced by someone anxious and uncertain. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I whispered, "but it did happen, and now we have to deal with the consequences." When I got home to my mother's house that night, I found a stack of legal documents waiting for me on the kitchen table. Custody papers, financial disclosures, and a formal request for a paternity test for the baby. "His lawyer dropped them off," Mom explained, her face flushed with anger. "The nerve of that man coming to my house like some kind of process server." I flipped through the papers with shaking hands. Elias was requesting primary custody of Leah, with supervised visitation for me until I could demonstrate stability and appropriate judgment. He wanted a complete financial audit, including my employment records and bank statements. He was being thorough, methodical, and completely ruthless. "He can't do this," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. He absolutely could do this, and he was doing it with the kind of precision that suggested he'd been planning it for a long time. "We'll fight him," Mom said firmly. "We'll get you the best lawyer money can buy, and show the court that you're a good mother who made one mistake." But as I stared at the papers, At the evidence of how completely Elias had outmaneuvered me, I wondered if it was really just one mistake, or if it was a series of choices that had led me exactly where I deserved to be. 3 weeks after the cafe incident, I thought the worst was behind me. The video had mostly stopped circulating, my mother had helped me find a lawyer, and I was slowly building a case for why I deserved joint custody of Leah. I even started going back to the gym, trying to reclaim some normalcy in my life. That's where I ran into Marcus, one of Shane's friends from the training staff. He was sympathetic about everything I'd been through, and when he invited me to join him and some friends for drinks at Bistro Cafe, I said yes. I needed to feel normal again, to be around people who didn't judge me for my mistakes. The group was fun and supportive, treating me like a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of my own destruction. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again, attractive, interesting, worthy of attention. "Your husband sounds like a control freak," said Jessica, one of the trainers. "Who ambushes someone in public like that?" "He's always been possessive," I agreed, the wine making me more talkative than usual. "He never wanted me to have friends or go out. It's like he wanted to keep me locked up in that boring suburban life forever." "You deserve so much better," Marcus said, refilling my glass. "Shane was an idiot for not fighting for you." The validation felt like a drug, and I found myself embellishing stories about Elias, painting him as increasingly controlling and unreasonable. The group hung on every word, their outrage on my behalf feeding my need to be seen as the wronged party. I was in the middle of describing how Elias had stolen Leah from me when I noticed a familiar figure approaching our table. My blood went cold as I recognized my husband walking toward us with that same controlled expression he'd worn during our last confrontation. "Zarina," he said quietly when he reached our table, "I need you to come home. There's been an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" I demanded, immediately suspicious. "Is Leah okay?" "Leah is fine, but we need to talk privately, now." "She's having a conversation here," Marcus interjected, clearly emboldened by the alcohol and the group dynamic. "Maybe you should learn some manners and wait your turn." Elias looked at Marcus with that same clinical interest he'd shown Shane. "And you are?" "Someone who knows how to treat a lady with respect." "I see. And treating a lady with respect involves encouraging her to drink while she's supposed to be caring for an infant." I felt my face flush. I'd left the baby with my mother, but Elias was right. I was supposed to be responsible, supposed to be proving that I was a fit parent. "One night out doesn't make me a bad mother," I snapped. "No, but abandoning your family for a personal trainer does." The words hit the table like a bomb. Jessica gasped. Marcus's face went red with anger, and I felt the familiar burn of public humiliation. "You have no right to talk to her like that." Marcus stood up, swaying slightly. "She told us all about you, about how you controlled her and made her feel worthless." "Is that what she told you?" Elias's voice was dangerously quiet. "That I controlled her?" "That's right. She said you never let her go out, never let her have friends, kept her trapped in some boring suburban prison." Elias pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. "Interesting, because according to her Instagram, she went out for girls' nights at least twice a month. She had regular coffee dates with friends, went to book clubs, took weekend trips to visit her college roommate. She joined a gym, took art classes, and went to concerts downtown." He looked up at Marcus. "Does that sound like someone who was trapped?" I watched Marcus's confident expression falter as Elias continued. "She also told you I was possessive and controlling, I assume. But she forgot to mention that I encouraged her to pursue her interests, supported her career advancement, and took over most of the childcare duties so she could have more freedom." Elias's voice was getting louder, drawing attention from nearby tables. "What she didn't tell you is that she used that freedom to have an 8-month affair with her personal trainer, while I was home helping our daughter with homework." "Elias, stop," I pleaded, but he was just getting started. Did she mention that the baby she's supposed to be home caring for isn't mine? That she lied about it for months, let me prepare for fatherhood, pick out names, set up the nursery, all while knowing the child belonged to another man? The entire cafe had gone quiet now, everyone straining to hear the drama unfolding at our table. I could see phones coming out again, people starting to record, and my heart sank as I realized I was about to go viral for all the wrong reasons again. "You're embarrassing yourself," I hissed. "I'm embarrassing myself?" Elias laughed, and there was something broken in the sound. "Zarina, you're sitting in a bar with strangers, drinking wine while you're supposed to be taking care of an infant, telling lies about our marriage to make yourself look like a victim. But I'm the one embarrassing myself?" Marcus stepped forward, his chest puffed out with liquid courage. "Hey man, back off. She doesn't need to take this abuse from you." "Abuse?" Elias turned his full attention to Marcus, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "You want to talk about abuse? Let's talk about emotional abuse. Let's talk about what it does to a 9-year-old girl when her mother abandons the family for another man. Let's talk about what it does to a husband when he finds out his wife has been lying to his face for 8 months. She made a mistake. She made dozens of mistakes. She lied, she cheated, she committed fraud on her timesheets to cover up her affair, and she's been manipulating everyone around her to avoid taking responsibility for any of it." I felt the walls closing in around me as Elias laid out my sins for everyone to hear, but I couldn't let him win, couldn't let him make me look like the villain in front of all these people. "I was lonely," I shouted, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. "I was married to a man who treated me like furniture, who never paid attention to me unless he needed something. I spent 10 years being invisible in my own life." "You were invisible because you chose to be," Elias shot back. "I asked you to come to school events with me. You said you were too busy. I planned date nights. You cancelled for work or friends. I tried to talk to you about problems in our marriage. You said I was being needy." "That's not how it happened." "That's exactly how it happened. And when you finally decided you wanted attention, instead of talking to your husband, you went out and found someone else to give it to you." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. Because he was right, wasn't he? I had cancelled date nights. I had avoided school events. I had shut down conversations about our relationship because they felt too heavy, too complicated. But admitting that would mean admitting that I was the problem, that I was exactly as selfish and destructive as he said I was. "You drove me to it," I said instead, my voice shaking. "If you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened." The cafe erupted in murmurs and gasps. Someone near the bar actually booed. I looked around at the faces surrounding me and saw judgment, disgust, and pity. Even Marcus and Jessica were looking at me differently now, like they were seeing me clearly for the first time. Elias stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. "I really hoped you'd eventually take responsibility for what you did, for Leah's sake, if nothing else. But you're never going to, are you? You're going to keep blaming everyone else until the day you die." He turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at me one more time. The emergency, by the way, was that Leah's teacher called. She's been having panic attacks at school, crying during class, asking if it's her fault that Mommy doesn't live with us anymore. "But don't worry, I told her you were busy." The words hit me like a slap. As Elias walked away, I sank back into my chair, suddenly sober and desperately aware of how badly I'd just humiliated myself. Again. The next morning, I woke up to find myself trending on social media once more. This time, the comments were even harsher, the judgment even more brutal. But worse than the stranger's opinions was the text message waiting on my phone. It was from Janet, my supervisor. "Don't bother coming in Monday. We'll mail your final paycheck." I'd lost my job, my reputation, and apparently my daughter's respect, all in the span of 24 hours. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I couldn't figure out how to blame it on anyone but myself. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken dreams. I sat next to my lawyer, David Chen, trying to project confidence I didn't feel while Elias and his legal team arranged their documents at the table across from us. The past 2 months had been a nightmare of depositions, character witnesses, and evidence gathering that had left me feeling like my entire life was being dissected under a microscope. "Remember," David whispered, "stick to the talking points we discussed. Emphasize your bond with Leah, your commitment to being a good mother, and your willingness to attend counseling." I nodded, smoothing my conservative dress and trying to ignore the way Elias's lawyer, Margaret Santos, was organizing what looked like a mountain of evidence against me. She was a sharp-faced woman in her 50s, with the kind of predatory smile that made me nervous. Judge Patricia Williams called the court to order, and I felt my stomach clench as she reviewed the case summary. This was it, the moment that would determine whether I got to be a real part of my daughter's life or just a weekend visitor. "Mrs. Santos, you may present your client's case," the judge said. Margaret Santos stood up with the kind of confidence that comes from holding all the winning cards. "Your Honor, this case is about protecting a 9-year-old child from the chaos and instability that her mother's choices have created." She clicked a remote, and a timeline appeared on the courtroom screen. For 8 months, Mrs. Lysol conducted an extramarital affair while lying to her husband and daughter about her whereabouts. She committed timesheet fraud at her workplace to cover up these absences, ultimately resulting in her termination. I watched in horror as my life was reduced to bullet points and bank statements. Every lie, every deception, every moment of poor judgment was laid out in clinical detail. The affair resulted in a pregnancy, which Mrs. Lysol initially attempted to pass off as her husband's child. When confronted with DNA evidence, rather than taking responsibility for her actions, she has consistently blamed others, her husband for being boring, her circumstances for being lonely, everyone except herself for the choices she made. Margaret clicked to the next slide, showing screenshots from social media. Mrs. Lysol's behavior has become increasingly erratic and public. She is engaged in confrontations that were filmed and went viral, exposing her daughter to public humiliation and schoolyard gossip. I wanted to object, to explain that I hadn't wanted those confrontations to go public, but David put a restraining hand on my arm. "Most concerning," Margaret continued, "is the impact on the child. Leah Lysol has been experiencing anxiety, panic attacks, and behavioral changes at school. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, will testify that Leah has asked repeatedly if her mother's absence is her fault." The words hit me like physical blows. I looked across the courtroom at Elias, who was staring straight ahead with that same controlled expression he'd worn throughout this entire nightmare. Margaret called witness after witness. Gina described how I acted at family dinners. Leah's teacher confirmed the panic attacks and behavior changes. My former supervisor, Janet, explained the timesheet fraud and how my personal drama damaged work and clients. Then Margaret asked the judge to speak with Leah in private. David objected because Leah was only 9, but the judge allowed it. Leah went into chambers looking scared, and when she came back out, she wouldn't look at me. When it was our turn, David tried to defend me. He called my mother, and he talked about Elias being distant and focused on work, but it sounded weak next to the evidence. When I spoke, I begged for another chance and promised counseling and supervised visits if needed. Then the judge asked if I took full responsibility. I couldn't say it. I tried to split the blame, and the judge's face changed. After a short recess, Judge Williams ruled. Elias got primary legal and physical custody. I got supervised visitation every other weekend, only if I completed parenting classes and counseling. It felt like my life ended in one sentence. Outside the courtroom, Elias didn't gloat. He only said he hoped I would use this time to figure out who I wanted to be. Then he walked away with Leah's future, while I stood there with Shane's crying baby, no job, no home, and no plan. In the parking lot, The truth finally hit me. I wasn't the victim. I built this outcome myself, and now I had to live inside what I ruined.